he studied initially international economics in Strasbourg, then in Heidelberg, then in London, then in the USA, finally ending with an MBA, also in the USA. Until 2007, he was managing director of Schiller International University, an international university by independent agencies. Since 2011, he's been working as the federal government's coordinator for transatlantic cooperation. He's a member of several clubs, chairman of the Terre der Heus Friends e.V., member of the advisory board of the Akademie Liechtenstein Gymnasium Sachsenheim, and in 1984 he joined the FDP party and the Young Liberals. He was first county chairman of the FDP Ludwigsburg District Association, then he was treasurer of the FDP District Verband Region Stuttgart, and then member of the state board and executive committee of the FDP Baden-Württemberg. Since 2002, he's been serving as a member of the parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic that Mr. Leibrecht has chosen today is the role of civil society in transatlantic relations. So I think that should fit in very well with our previous discussion about also the post-Obama, or the second term of Obama, and the role of cultural diplomacy in civil society. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for Mr. Harald Leibrecht. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, what a welcome. And sorry, I'm a bit late. I was stuck in the traffic. Took me, I think, nearly 45 minutes from Berlin Mitte to come here. I should have taken the subway. It would have been much better. And thank you, Mr. Donfried, for your invitation. And yeah, you mentioned your father, and it's interesting enough. It was last year on October 3rd. That is our national holiday. I was in Boston, and I had to hold a speech on the German unification and all that, and then I mentioned that my father was professor at Harvard in the 50s, and then your father came to me and said, "Hey, I know your father. We were together in those olden days, and they've been good friends." And then he mentioned that he even knows my little village where I live in Germany, tiny place. Only I think about 1,000 people living there, but it's wonderful. And so there's still a lot of ties, transatlantic ties, I would say. So it's wonderful to be here and speak today to you about the role of civil society in transatlantic relations. Well, just yesterday or on Tuesday, Barack Obama was re-elected President of the United States of America, and I congratulate him on that and wish him all the best on this most challenging but at the same time the most important job your country, United States, have to give. But I think it's one of the most important jobs worldwide anyway. One can claim that the United States is one of the most multicultural countries in the world, and President Obama chose the unity of his diverse nation as a central topic of his election speech yesterday morning, and I quote, he said, "What makes America exceptional are the bonds that hold together the most diverse nation on earth," end of quote. Still, especially this election showed how much ethnic background can influence voter behavior. And I would come to the interesting question on demographics in the United States a little later. First, I would like to focus on transatlantic relationship and the role that civil society plays in shaping and forming them. Not only in the United States, but also in Germany. People followed the United States, the election there, with excitement and great interest. And I don't solely speak of politicians and academics here. On the contrary, the election of the President of the United States and the preceding election campaigns, including the primaries, have been a personal matter to many German citizens over the past month. To choose, and to those who have already been to the United States, for example, on vacation or for a longer term with an exchange program or for professional reasons, and who still feel connected to the United States, or to those who have families over there, like me, for example. I still have 2 brothers living in the United States, or to those who just have a general interest in this extraordinary country or in international politics, or to those who feel connected to Americans, maybe because they had US soldiers as neighbors, often for many decades. All this illustrates that the transatlantic partnership is much more than the sum of close economic and political ties. Already months before the election, a discussion on the future of the transatlantic relations evolved and has been intense ever since. One can often hear about the United States pivot to Asia and the move away from Europe. But as a proof of the close and intensifying connection between America and Europe, you just need to look at the strong economic ties between the two countries and continents. In 2011, the United States ranked second only after France as the most important receiving country of German imports. Germany is the top trading partner of the United States in Europe. While the economic crisis has slowed down trade between the nations, we have again seen a steady increase in transatlantic trade since 2009. Bilateral trade between Germany and the United States amounted to 147 billion US dollars in 2011, up from 131 billion in 2010 and 150 billion US dollars in 2009. Bilateral trade and investment should increase even further if, as aspired, a comprehensive trade and investment agreement between the United States and the European Union is negotiated in the near future. And I hope that with a re-elected President Obama, who will not face another election campaign, and that he will also focus even further on this trade agreement between Europe and the United States. Also, in the field of international politics, Germany and the United States will continue to be close partners. Our close political ties are based on shared values and the same principal interests and goals that we pursue. Our cooperation entails ambitions to end the cruel conflict in Syria, to support peaceful and successful transition processes in North Africa, to overcome the international economic and financial crisis, and to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Our common agenda seems to be ever expanding. With the beginning of the 21st century, global challenges like the fight against terrorism or energy questions, as well as cybersecurity, were added to the dense transatlantic agenda. However, one must not wear rose-colored glasses. Close and trustful transatlantic relations cannot be taken for granted. Europe has to demonstrate to the United States that we are reliable partners when it comes to dealing with global challenges. In the discussion on the future of transatlantic partnership, one element is often neglected: the role of the civil societies. For me, the transatlantic relationship at its core is about people. It's the people-to-people ties and the cross-Atlantic social networks that sustain the transatlantic relations. And these people ties serve as a much stronger connector than bilateral trade agreement. These personal ties are at its core the idea of cultural diplomacy. Germans and Americans have built numerous bridges across the Atlantic. Our societies are connected in a variety of ways. Let me just name just a few. Since 1945, around 70 million American service members and their families have been stationed in Germany. They made the American way of life and mentality accessible to us. After their duty, most of them returned to the United States with a very positive impression and image of Germany. Around 650,000 employees work for approximately 3,000 German companies located in the US. Vice versa, around 2,700 American companies in Germany employ more than 600,000 people living in Germany. This results not only in a vibrant exchange related to work techniques and administrational issues, but also in cross-cultural exchange. Around 50% of Americans have German ancestors. German, American, and German Immigrants to the US preserve German cultural heritage in the US in various clubs and organizations. Just mention the yearly Steubenparade in New York. And finally, there are numerous exchange programs that offer high school and college students, scientists and artists from both countries the opportunity to get to know the other country. Often, the alumni of these programs feel connected to the United States and Germany and the friends they have made there for a lifetime. Today, almost 10,000 Germans study in the United States, about 8,000 Americans study in Germany, for which one half is registered in a university, while the other half participates in study abroad programs and summer schools. And these numbers these numbers sound quite impressive. However, there's still a lot of potential. The US is not the top 10 listing of origin countries for foreign students in Germany. Ladies in Germany, let me just highlight maybe 3 example programs which have been proven particularly successful. First, there's our all-time classic, the GAP program, the 40-year-old German-American partnership program that organizes cross-Atlantic exchanges for high school students. And more than 230,000 Germans and Americans already seized the opportunity to get to know each other's culture. Second, there is the DAAD, the German academic exchange facilities, service facilities, all kinds of study programs, as does Fulbright on the American side. In this regard, let me mention the DAAD bestseller, the Research Internship Program in Science and Engineering, the so-called RISE program, which offers undergraduates internships in mixed German-American research teams at universities in Germany and in the United States. The success of this program shows clearly how important Germany is as a place of excellent engineering. Another important target group for us are young American Jews. They are generally very interested in Europe and Germany, but for good reason, sometimes reluctant to take the first step for a visit. For them, there is a program called German Close-Up. Young American Jews meet modern Germany, administered by Centrum Judaicum here in Berlin. Established in 2007, this program has already brought far more than 1,000 American Jews to Germany, and most of them are impressed and positively excited about the new, modern and diverse Germany they have the chance to discover. Even though we have these exchange programs and a dense network of ties between our civil societies, we are facing some challenges to maintain those close connections. Earlier, in times of the Cold War and the recovery of Europe after World War II, many Americans, especially leading American politicians like Henry Kissinger, had personal ties to Germany. Americans looked to Germany and helped it to get to its feet again after the devastating war. For instance, for establishing the German Marshall Fund. Nowadays, the connection of the American political elite is no longer an automatism. Young Americans don't inherit a national interest in Germany and Europe anymore. We see a much more diverse society with a growing part of Americans with Asian and Hispanic roots. We have to find new means to reach out to them, to their future elite and decision makers, and spark their interest in Germany and Europe. The German language plays a crucial role in this regard. Unfortunately, far fewer Americans are learning Germany now than was the case 20 years ago. Even though Germany is still ranked third amongst the foreign language taught, and knowledge in Germany, the knowledge in Germany is deteriorating. That's why we have taken some first steps to work against this trend. Even in times of financial crisis and budget restriction, the German government and our Foreign Office has determined to allocate more resources to promote German language in the United States. We are planning to kick off a multi-annual and sustainable program. German and American partners have already developed many ideas to make German language classes an attractive and interactive pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, with respect to the overall topic of your conference, I would like to finish my presentation with some remarks about multiculturalism. Just like historical developments did have an impact on the transatlantic relationships, so do demographic changes. In both countries, we are facing the challenge of including minority groups in the society. 37% of the 340 million inhabitants in the United States belong to a minority group. Around 13% of all US inhabitants are identified as immigrants. By 2042, Americans who identify themselves as Hispanic, Black, Asian, American, Indian, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders will together outnumber non-Hispanic whites. At the same time, increasingly, fewer Americans have European roots. Today, only 64%. In Germany, almost 1/5 of the German population has a migration background, and the number is steadily increasing. It is high time to include a dialogue about integration policies in the transatlantic dialogue. We should discuss our respective approaches in education policy, for instance. What can societies do to provide equal opportunities? What experiences have the United States made with anti-discrimination policies, and what conclusions can be drawn from it? Which lessons drawn by the Islam conference in Germany can be helpful for integration of Muslims in the United States society? There's a lot we can learn from each other. When it comes to different programs linking societies on both sides of the Atlantic, we have to make sure to actively include Americans and Germans with migration background, and in our cross-Atlantic exchange programs, as well and win their interest for transatlantic friendship. Some programs have already been developed. The Freie Universität in Berlin, for example, has set an example. In the past 3 years, it welcomed students with migration background who could not afford a stay abroad on their own to a 4-week Discovery Germany program. It included a German language and history course. Also, the American Fulbright Commission developed some promising ideas in this regard. In 2013, they will offer a teacher seminar called Diversity in German Education for US teachers, and vice versa for German teachers about the United States system. Yet, there's still a lot of potential and a lot of work for us to do in this regard. It is not the government who plays the most important part in the civil society. We should make sure that the dialogue between our societies on both sides of the Atlantic stays broad and meaningful. Let me conclude my speech with an inspiring appeal for a multicultural and diverse society by the newly re-elected US president from his election speech. He said, "It doesn't matter whether you are black or white, or Hispanic or Asian or Native American, or young or old or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight, you can make it here in America if you are willing to try." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leibrecht, for a fascinating discussion, and I think really touching on the key points. I agree, I think, with all of them, especially you were mentioning DAAD. I always say that's one of my favorite examples, really facilitating. In the sense, the role of DAAD is just to facilitate, bring the students to Germany. You pick your professors, you pick your classes, you can make friends, you can make enemies, and really, in that sense, I think is a wonderful example for building trust, as well as the other civil society organizations you mentioned. What I'd suggest we do, let's take 1 or 2 questions now, and then Mr. Leibrecht has kindly agreed to do an interview with us. For the interview, we'll move to the stage over there, where we can have a little bit more intimate session to ask some questions and discuss also multiculturalism. But before we move there, I'm happy to take one or two questions or comments from you here in the setting. So I see one hand in the back, so should we use that microphone? Or? Okay. And as always, briefly introduce yourself.
We won't try it.
No, all right, so we'll use this microphone. If you could briefly introduce yourself and try to keep your questions brief, then we can allow for more.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from Ireland and I'm an intern here. You spoke about the transatlantic relationship being based on shared values between America and Europe. But I, for one, kind of think we take for granted a shared Western culture. And I think there are a lot of differences between American values and European values. For example, the role of religion in American society as compared to Europe, our focus on diplomacy, welfare state, stuff like that. How big do you think these differences in values are? And although I think Obama will work towards strengthening the transatlantic relationship, how do you see it developing long term? Do you think we're drifting apart or moving toward each other?
We have to be very careful that we do not drift apart. And that's why I did mention that I'm a bit afraid that there's a lack of young American politicians who look over the Atlantic. And when I'm a lot in Washington, and then I talk to congressmen and then tell them and ask them to come over to learn more about Germany, more about Europe. And they often, unfortunately, tell me, Harald, I would like to come, but if I travel to Europe, the people in my constituency, they ask me, what are you doing in Europe? Yeah, there are so many problems to be solved at home, and they are constantly campaigning. It's there's a different political system in the United States, so it is a bit tough to really attract more politicians to come over. I think there are a lot of Germans going over to the United States, but it is difficult if the other side don't really know your country as well. Well, on the other side, we know America is a very important country in the world, and politicians have to be everywhere. But I think we should really try to boost the relations between the United States and Germany or Europe in general. Again, I was often asked, how do you feel about President Obama not having been to Germany the last 4 years? And I said, well, I think it's not necessary that we do have to visit or to see the president so often in Germany. On the other side, it would have a lot of symbolism to it if he would come. And as you know, the Germans, they love Obama. I think over 90% would have voted for him. Also, they don't know not much about the internal politics in the United States. But I thought, he's cool, and after President George W. Bush, they were very happy to have a very dynamic young president, and so that was seen very positive. On the shared values, I still think that we do share values. First of all, we have a lot in common in our history, and not only in the concerning the negative side with the Second World War, but the Germans, we do owe a lot to the United States. I represent the first generation I would say one of the first generations in Germany which grew up in peace and freedom and also relative prosperity and wealth, and we owe that to our American friends. We Germans sometimes tend to forget this, but I think we carry it in our heart, and it's very important. And I think in a good friendship and a good transatlantic relations must also be able to face controversial questions as well. As you know, we are very sad that with the election yesterday, 2 days ago, for example, the people in California decided not to abolish the death penalty. We hoped that they would do. We have different views on this. We still hope that President Obama will close Guantanamo at one point. It was one of his goals when he took over office 4 years ago. And we all know how difficult it is, but I think we both share the value for Rechtsstaatlichkeit and code of law and human rights. And this is one issue where we think, we are a bit apart, but it's important that we talk about it and not just avoid such a discussion. So that's one of the issues. And we also share values when it comes to human rights, let's say in Asia, in China. Now I mentioned that the US has this Asian pivot, or Pacific pivot, but to be honest, we Germans have it too, and we Europeans as well. Until last year, the American market was for us the most important outside of the European Union for us Germans. It's now overtaken by the Chinese. So we do a lot of trade with China too. And we have our human rights issues there as well. So it's a balance we have to find, and it's a difficult political question as well. But I promote strongly that we use our very strong and good transatlantic ties and relations to kind of, in a positive way, conquer these new Asian markets together. We are competitors maybe in goods and services in the financial world, but as we have these shared values, I think it's good that we try to stick together, the US and Europe. We're only 10% of the people in the world, but we are over 50% of the world market still. And it's maybe decreasing, but we're still strong. And we should use these strengths to also try to identify standards maybe with the Asian market. If we are not successful on that, I'm sure, for example, the Chinese will dictate our standards. And I want, as long as it's possible, want to stay on top on these questions. So our transatlantic relations really not only is between America and Europe, but really worldwide in a way.
No, I agree. I think the importance is definitely a global scale. And what you were saying, I'd just like to underline also the role of cultural diplomacy, as you pointed out, isn't just to talk about the things we agree on, but also the things we disagree on. And I think it's a very important role, and that follows up very well the presentation I gave before your speech. So I want to underline that point. Also, let's take this opportunity to express our gratitude to Mr. Leibrecht, and I'd suggest let's move the discussion now to the second format for the interview, and then we can also continue the discussion in a more multilateral format. Before we move there, if we could please express our sincere gratitude to Mr. Harald Leibrecht. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.